A characteristic of a psychopath is this, okay? And by the way, with a bloody psychopath, and partly because I've worked in prison, everybody will have to bear with me. I haven't become totally callous, but just like working in an emergency room, you kind of have emergency room humor, and nothing's funny about any of this. But I would say the body count of a bloody psychopath is relatively low. Now, let me define that. One victim is too many, okay? But if you think about how many victims a sex abuser has, they have a bloodless trail of victims that are emotionally bleeding the rest of their life. So a bloody psychopath has what I call a short shelf life. They will eventually, all things being equal, they'll eventually be found out, because those are the ones, understandably, right? We have manhunts that hits the news. Everybody's looking for this person, understandably, and we need to. We don't want to have bloody psychopaths going unattended, but those are the ones that get all the attention, understandably, right? They'll shut a city down. These are the ones that we do manhunts over, understandably. But for as many victims as they will have, a white-collar psychopath far exceeds that, because they do so in a way where they don't shed any blood. I'll give one extreme example. I'm not aware of whether or not Hitler ever shed anybody's blood. I don't think he himself pulled a trigger. I don't know. I haven't read anything about that. So let me ask you, who was more dangerous? Those that were running the camps, or Hitler, who orchestrated all the mass execution of everybody in the concentration camps? So he bears more responsibility because he orchestrated all of this. So you have those that are very bright individuals, and here is the working definition of a psychopath, but they get into positions of influence and power as far as the white-collar psychopaths, okay? And they can do tremendous damage. By the way, where do we find them? We find them in finance, we find them on Wall Street, we find them in politics, we find them in education, we find them anywhere, we find them in medicine, we find them anywhere. They go wherever they can easily access victims. They will look for positions of power and trust and respectability. We find them in the ministry. That's my greatest concern. That's why churchprotect.org was started. Think about the Catholic orphanages. Okay, I'm not going to rag on Catholics per se. I have a lot of empathy for Catholics. I'm married to a woman that came out of a Catholic background. I went to a Catholic high school. But anytime, and what we're discovering is this, and I am becoming more and more convinced that orphanages, because think about the kids that are in there, they have nobody to look out for themselves. Boarding schools, humanitarian organizations, for instance, that went into Haiti, that had access to all these parentless kids. I am very convinced more and more that these are havens for predators, and that a strong case can be made now, in my mind, that the orphanages that the Catholic Church, not just the Catholic Church, and I am not anti-religion. I'm a Christian by not just background, but I'm actually a Christian. But predators love, half the fun for them is playing good people for fools. And they will go where people trust them, and they will go where people will not ask questions. And half the fun for a psychopath is the tactics, it's game theory, it's being able to put it right out there. And that's where people also need to understand, what are we seeing with these men that play dress up? They're putting it right out there. Drag queen story hour. Here's another huge concern. And there was a good article. I was interviewed for the Epic Times story on furries. If anybody's familiar with furries, I was not. The first time I was informed of furries, I said, what was a really heinous pedophile? He says, you don't know about furries, Mr. Uhler? And I said, no, what are furries? He said, oh, where have you been? You need to get out more. I said, what are furries? Well, think of a big mascot-like costume at Disneyland or sporting events. How much of a person's identity is covered up? 100%. With Drag Queen Story Hour, how much of the guy's identity is covered up? A lot. You can't make out who that is. What does a perpetrator need? What do they thrive on, even online? Anonymity. These perps that are online, they create these fake accounts. They'll use little icons, oftentimes of anime or deviant art. Okay, but you'll see these little furry icons. They will use anything that dumbs down a parent's intuition to where now a parent will hand kids over. People think, and we're taught, stranger danger, white van, creepy guy trolling a park, going around the perimeter, and he has a trench coat, right? Boots, trench coat. He's hanging around in trees, looking through. That's the vast minority. That's like 1%. These guys aren't stupid, right? The dumb guys get found out. So where are you going to go? And they all talk. Perpetrators communicate extensively with each other. So with the trans movement and Drag Queen Story Hour and furries, you're seeing a convergence in schools. And then Soji Sex Ed is bringing material to kids, which otherwise would get adults arrested. If you showed that material to kids, as a matter of fact, the Soji Sex Ed material is so porn filled that if the guys in my sex offender treatment group, and people need to understand this, if a sex offender on parole was found with the material in the books, some of those pictures that are being shown to elementary school kids, if those pictures, the same ones we're showing right out of these books, were found on a sex offender's phone that's in sex offender treatment, he'd be failed out of sex offender treatment and violated and sent back to prison.
It would be like an instant breach, pretty much.
Absolutely it would. But we protect it because it comes under the guise of sex ed. Really, like these perpetrators don't use these kind of books. The exact same kind of books are what the perpetrators sat down with various kids, said, let me read you a bedtime story. Let me show you a video. Oh, this is what adults, this is love. This is how we show love. And especially the furries, what's so dangerous is it starts with what's called anthropomorphic art, where you have animals that start to take on human characteristics, and they can show all sorts of abuse and pornographic stuff, but they won't get arrested because it is animated, because it's cartoon. But perpetrators will use this, and they'll use the online chat forums to begin to establish that relationship. And that's exactly, your family fell prey to what these perpetrators do. And when a man goes deviant, let me describe this. This is the most important thing, because I didn't understand this. I had been trained like the vast majority of us, even though I was heading into the field of counseling. So now I'm in graduate school. We got graduate level books. But I had heard the urban myth, what most people have heard, which is men who offend are reenacting their own abuse at the age they select a victim, at the age that they themselves were abused, and therefore we need to have empathy and get treatment. I'm not against treatment. I do treatment for sex offenders. I am a certified sex offender treatment professional. That's what I do, along with regular mental health. But
Jon, that's the old way of viewing that, though, right? There's like a new way of kind of viewing that, because this old way of, well, all these men that are abusers were abused themselves. I think, didn't they have a study that came out that showed that that's not actually the case, that some people are drawn into it through like other deviant ways, and not like what's it called, like pornography, like they view something that's more softcore and it gets more hardcore, and that's not enough, and so then they go even more and more deviant.
100%. As a matter of fact, Russell, I'm not aware of a study. I'm at some point in time going to publish. I just haven't had time. Okay, but all my material, by the way, if you want to look at my background as far as what I have put online, as far as the research, you can go to churchprotect.org under the Truths tab and start scrolling down. I have what I call better than peer-reviewed research, because peer review are a bunch of academics. I'm not minimizing this whatsoever, but a bunch of academics that review one another's work. Well, you can come out of undergrad, go into master's, and then PhD, and now you're going to do your dissertation. The question is this: how many years have you worked in a prison by that time? You haven't. Well, I'm telling you what, if you haven't worked in a prison, and at one point in time, I never would have believed this, but unless you've worked in a prison, you can't do effective treatment on sex offenders. Why? Because I'm also doing sex offender treatment in the community, and I don't have any access to what I need to. So if somebody says they've done extensive research on pedophiles and the research is in the community, they're a fool, because they are taking, how do they get their information? Self-reports from who? The perpetrator. Why would somebody, before they've ever been busted, why would they go seek out treatment? It's potential damage control, by the way, in case they do get busted, because then they're going to be able to have the therapist stand up or write a letter saying he slept or he fell off the wagon. Okay, 100% of all sex offenders, and this speaks to what you just raised, and this is important for everybody to understand, 100%. You will never find an exception. How do I know? Because I dug deep and I have all access to all criminal histories, including juvenile histories. Those are not as, when they're expunged, they do not disappear. Okay, so on psych staff, I had access to everything. Okay. Child-on-child offense is different than adults who have made it into adulthood that are well-adjusted. A child that's been perped on by another child, by the time they reach middle school and then high school, they will be a troubled child. You will see behavioral evidence of that one extreme or the other, either acting out or acting in. It is not plausible. It is not believable, and it doesn't happen that if a kid has been sexually traumatized, that they will be able to keep it together until they graduate high school. It never happens. Zero. It doesn't happen. You will see. There are the indicators. They will start to either pull within. They'll start the self-injurious behaviors going on. They'll start anorexia. They'll become depressed, anxious. So you mean to tell me a child in third grade who's perped on can make it out of high school without anybody knowing? No, and the acting out child, certainly that child's going to come to attention. And that's where I, having a background in residential treatment, can tell you no child makes it unscathed who's been perped on. You will see behavioral indicators. And that's why I tell people, if you want to research the effects of child-on-child offense in prison, you don't go to the sex offender unit. You go to the drug and alcohol unit. That's why the what I call the regular sex offenders, if I can say that, those that have adult victims, that's why they want to kill the pedophiles. Why? Because there are no secrets in jail, and they don't buy this minor attracted persons crap. It is a myth. If somebody can make it into adulthood reasonably well adjusted, and how do you know? Once they're arrested, you listen to the comments of the people around them. You have one of two extremes. The news reporter goes out, standing in front of the house of the perpetrator, and they interview a neighbor on either side, and the neighbors will say this: yeah, we always knew that Mr. Joe, he was a little creepy. We told kids to stay away from him. Okay, right? That's a guy that may have been perped up, but he was creepy. The guy that is the sophisticated one that was never perped on is the one where you have people say, I Dr. So-and-so, Pastor so, Elder so-and-so, I can't believe it. You mean Scoutmaster, Dr. So-and-so, my coach? Not him. No, I can't. There. Why doesn't anybody notice? Why didn't they notice? Larry Nassar of the U.S. Olympic gymnastics team. Why didn't anybody notice? It's exactly the same guy that groomed your family, because these guys are self-controlled. They are methodical. Robert Hare will call them impulsive. That is one of the indicators of psychopathy, but for the most dangerous guy, you will not find impulsivity. That's why they're so sophisticated. And let me speak to deviance real fast. There's a progression. So first of all, 100% of all men who offend sexually have been deeply steeped in porn for years prior to offending. There is a progression downward. So 100, you'll never find an exception. Now, there's always been deviance, but it's always followed a progression. Ever since porn and the internet, it has supercharged the process. That's why we're seeing so many younger predators. Okay, so 100%, so the common denominator now is porn, without exception. 100% of pedophiles, 100%. You'll never find an exception. And about 98, 99%. So 100% of pedophiles will be busted with child porn, which is child rape porn. And 98, 99% will be busted also. They'll have charges which will also include the distribution or dissemination of it, because they share these pictures. They create these pictures. These are not mild-mannered individuals. These are calculating predators. And predators know us better than we know them. And they know this, that the average normal person wants to give the benefit of the doubt to other people. That's all a predator needs, because the average person has a conscience. We don't want to assume that somebody has gone there, has done that, if we don't have proof. Well, if you have to wait to find proof out, look at how long it took, and look at the damage and the trauma, Russell, that was done to your family by the time, I mean, that perp had been long gone out of your family. So if we have to wait for definitive proof, we're going to be waiting till the cows come home, because these guys aren't stupid. So that's why they override intuition. That's what grooming is. Little by little, I'm causing you to dumb down your intuition, which is your reality testing. And we used to say this, when it came to things that are just basic, right in front of our face, we would say, you know what? It's kind of like biology 101. It's like a no-brainer. These things, isn't that interesting? The trans deception, what have they gone after? They've caused us to not even be able to think in terms of biology 101. If a perpetrator can get us to deny what's right in front of our own face, which is called our own sex and sexuality, then they know we'll drink the Kool-Aid. That's why it's so heinous. And these perpetrators, they've gone through stages, and this is what people also need to understand. I didn't understand this until one day working with these guys, because I was digging deep. You know, what's interesting is an outside academic researcher, and they can get meaningful stuff. But they also don't understand that for sex offenders, if they're going to be interviewed, if you're a researcher, you're either asking for specific names of specific inmates, or you're doing this general thing that I want to interview some sex offenders. Okay. On the other side of in the prison, what happens? Well, people don't know that process. What happens is it goes onto the block, or the housing unit, or the prison cell, or the cell block. Okay. A notice is put on the bulletin board or done through the unit manager. We're looking for a pedophile who's willing to be interviewed. Okay, the one crime that every inmate's going to hide is what? For fear of their own safety, is being a pedophile. So what inmate is actually going to say, oh, I'm a pedophile, I'll sign up for that, because don't think people don't talk. Don't in prison. There are no secrets. Everybody knows when it comes time for that interview, because it's during visiting hours. People know when there's a news crew, right? You have inmate workers. Trust me, everybody knows when pedophiles are being interviewed. They're a marked man now. Why would they do that? Because the only ones that are going to do that are the ones that are assured of getting out, or they're put in a certain unit where they're safe, or they have enough protection because they've manipulated the prison administration. They feel empowered enough that nobody can touch them. So they're specially guarded. So they're going to what they're doing, and the average academic researcher doesn't understand this. When pedophiles, they know, the pedophile knows there's either guards or speaker system, and everything they're saying is being recorded. They're using that to practice for parole. They're saying the right thing, and they want to get out certain narratives into the literature, which can help ultimately influence public opinion, public policy, and legislation, which is now they want to flip sympathies. They want to invert and misplace sympathies so that we start going easy on them, start destigmatizing them, so that their sentence structure is less, and we're placing the public at danger. But the process of deviance quickly is this. Lust is different than deviance. Everybody understands lust. That's a strong pull. If a guy gives into lust, that is the first process and the beginning process of objectification. I'm not seeing the person as a person any longer. Once I get into power and control, now I'm really not seeing the person. That's the dangers of kink or BDSM. It's very heinous. And ladies, if you think that a guy is viewing the BDSM stuff the way you are in 50 Shades of Grey, I was working with sex offenders doing a group. The first time that movie came out on Valentine's Day, and the male sex offender said this, it was who I was working with, they said that book and those movies have done more to groom women than they could have ever done. It scripted the mind. What used to be sexual assault now, and it's fantasy, but now is being welcomed by women. They're tolerating this stuff. And by the time a guy becomes deviant, and here's the key, and this is, it's like a jet flying into a cloud bank and getting inverted, where they totally become different. Instead of what used to be good, bad, right, wrong, it becomes inverted, and there's about 10 stages they go through. Deviance is this. It is not about attraction. That's why no man is attracted to a child. Deviance is that the human mind has now become predatorial, and the goal is to impact negatively the person you're interacting with so that you're going to scar their soul and leave a lasting impact. You want to harm and traumatize and terrorize. You want to leave a lasting impact. A guy can only get an erection when he's deviant, when he knows that the person on the receiving end of him is being harmed. A normal guy cannot get an erection unless he knows that his partner is enjoying herself. A guy who's deviant can only get an erection when he knows that he's traumatizing the person. That's key.
Well, and I just want to add on to that, because I talked about this before, just based on my own research that I've done, and that a lot of it comes down to power, and an absolute power over another person, because the offender, the person that's doing the offending, some of it might be lust in some manner, but the ultimate end goal is the humiliation. It's the absolute degradation of their victim. That's why, let's say that this was an example that was told to me by someone before, and they told me, they said, well, what's the ultimate way in prison to show power over, for a man to show power over another man? It's to rape them. And it's not because that man is a homosexual that wants to be with that man. That man knows that if they rape that other person, that person is completely powerless. All power is taken away. They can't, stabbing them may not work, punching them up may not work, but they know that if they sexually assault that person is effectively dominated now. They use their body as a weapon. And that's when I talk about, this, what sex offenders do. They're using their body as a weapon against their victim.
That's right, Russell. But I really, yes to everything you've said, but I want people to understand the difference. I can have power over somebody, strong arming them in prison. I can have power without wanting to degrade and traumatize and humiliate. Once I go there, now I'm deviant. Now it's not enough for me just to have power, because now it's like organized crime. You have to pay for protection. I have power over you. A psychopath, let me define, there's 3 characteristics. It all comes down to conscience. So pedophiles are not born. It doesn't matter what Dr. James Cantor says. The one thing he will not acknowledge is how much porn has affected the brain. And so how does a man become a pedophile? They all start with adult porn. These researchers will never look at how much porn these guys have gotten into. So you continue down the pathway into porn, it will always get harder. It converges. It's like an hourglass. It all converges at barely legal. A regular sex offender, it's even bizarre to say it like that, will stop and back up. The most deviant of kind will continue. And that's when the age and stage gets less. And that's when the desire to mar and scar and leave a lasting impact. So no man is attracted to a child. They're lying through their teeth. Okay. They want to destroy the mind and leave a lasting impact. That's deviance. And that's where what we're seeing play out in the trans deception and drag queen's story are, people now need to understand these men are trying to gain access to kids. Men who want to dress and drag, stay with adults. With all of this, it's not homophobic. Okay, I don't address what adults do. I may have my own personal opinion. You'll never find one thing I've ever said publicly about adults with adults. I don't care. If you want to do weird stuff, if you want to go into a gay bar and do fanny jamming, I don't care. Get your hands off of kids and women. And so if anybody's going to flip the script, I am not against any of this. I am for the raising of the bar for the protection of women and children. So men and women's sports, the guys are accessing the showers. That's all they care about. You want to find out why? You prevent them from going in the showers, and they can't take their camera cell phones. You don't think they're taking pictures? You'll see them scream bloody murder. Okay, just like the Wii Spa thing. So no man wants to gain access to, if you see an adult male who's uniquely interested in children, the greatest complaint of any wife in marriage counseling is he won't talk to me and he won't spend time with the kids. If you have an adult male that seems to be a child magnet, you are probably dealing with a predator. And for those of you guys that start to squawk like, oh, how mean-hearted, what I say is this: no, you know darn good and well in this day and age, the responsibility is yours. If you don't want to be viewed as a pedophile, if you don't want to be viewed as a potential predator, get your butt away from these kids. You do it in a reasonable fashion with a bunch of adult men. We need healthy men involved in the lives of kids. But if you have a man that's trying to get alone with kids, we got a problem. Even if it's Uncle So-and-so, why isn't he with the rest of the adults? Why is he playing with the rest of the kids in the upstairs bedroom? Guess what? We got an issue, and he knows it. And don't allow bright people to play brain dead. They darn well know. In this day and age, everybody understands about perps. That's why deviant men that are dressing in women's underwear and drag to get around kids, that's the only reason. Even some of the drag queens are finally coming out, like Kitty Demure and I forget the other one. They're saying, do not let men in drag be around kids. Men in drag need to stay around men in drag. Okay.
Well, I actually think, John, that's actually a more common sentiment that people think. But these drag queens, they don't want to speak up because they don't want to be stigmatized by their own groups and all that. But they need to speak up, because I know a couple of people that, again, they're living their life. They're adults, and they go and they do adult entertainment for other adults where they dress in drag. And I've asked them, I said, well, what do you think about this? And publicly they say, well, it is what, and they kind of give these half answers. But when I talk to them privately, they tell me I'm against it. But, there's this sort of thing where it's almost been promoted and they don't want to say anything about it. I said, well, you're the one that needs to say something. You're the important voice. You're the one that's involved in this industry that can affect change. Your voice is going to be way more impactful than me, where they're just going to say, well, this is just another bigot, just another transphobic, homophobic bigot, right, or whatever.
What I tell people is, do not be fazed by that statement. You bring it always back around to this. And here's the issue. The issue is this: the protection of women and children. If you're an adult man, you stay around other men. You stay around other adults. I don't care what you do. Do not get around kids. If you are a man and you like to play dress up, number one, you're developmentally delayed. I'll share that with you, but to each their own. You notice none of these guys are going into old folks' homes and reading. Now, there's a population of people that need people to read to them. If they have such a hankering to dress up and go read, there's a whole population, an aging population, that are shut-ins, that are in, retirement communities that need people to come read to them. That's where these men need to be going. And what I would challenge these kind of men with, as well as also the furries, again, don't have kids. As a matter of fact, here's the one thing you won't hear out of furries, which is this: it's not appropriate or safe for kids. You adults, go play dress up all you want, but what I want to challenge these adults with is this: you know what? Maybe it's time to put away your toys, to put away, go ahead and do whatever you're going to, but don't sit there and run your mouth talking about how sensitive you are when you're not meaningfully involved in the lives of other people. Why don't you, instead of playing dress up, why don't you pick up a hammer or a screw? Why don't you go to somebody's yard that you know, let's say a widow that needs help? Make yourself useful. Donate your time in a constructive way rather than a narcissistic, myopic way where all you're doing is getting together with a bunch of adults who really could be spending their time. Think about how many homeless people there are. You could be spending time in a soup kitchen, but no, you want to play dress up. That's fine. Do that. But don't allow kids to be around you, or don't access kids. And the furries are so defensive when I simply say this. Given the level of sexual deviance and how many sexual predators there are and have been found in furries because they flock to where they can hide their identity, simply say this, that this is not an activity or a community that kids should be involved with. Wait till they're age 18.